we'll start calling the roll, and then, of course, Kelly will let Mr. Stuxa in if there are any issues, hopefully. So let's go ahead and get started, Tammy.
Okay. All right. When I call your name, please say here. Vice Chair Draghi? Okay.
Here.
All right. Chair Sanchez?
Here.
Regent Shelton? Regent Shelton?
I'm here. I couldn't get it unmuted. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Regent Starkey?
Here.
Regent Stetska? Regent Tackard?
Here.
Dr. Albright?
Here.
Dr. Jade Bourne?
Here.
Wendy Delvello?
Here.
Karen Edwards?
Here.
Dr. Cynthia Griffith?
Here.
Mr. Carl Steger?
Here.
Kelly Clint?
Here.
Myself, Tammy Giffro. Board Counsel Jonathan Brush?
Here.
Mr. Greg Hill?
Here.
Mr. Kevin Matoga?
Here.
And Regents Crum, Marvel, and Secretary Hertenberger notified the chair that they would not be in attendance today. So for the record, I want to make that statement.
Thank you, Ms. Giffro.
We have not heard back.
Nothing from Regent Stetska? Okay.
No, nothing from Roger.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and proceed, and Mr. Klimt, if you would just watch out for him. Excuse me. It is now 12:04, so I'm going to get started. Dr. Albrecht, do you certify that the notice of the meeting was posted in accordance with Title 5, Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code?
I do so certify.
Being that it is 12:04 and this meeting is hereby called to order, we have the presence of a quorum attending by video conference. Notice of this workshop has been posted online for at least 72 hours. On March 16, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings laws to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus COVID-19. In accordance with those suspended rules, the board certifies the following. A, although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference. This meeting is being held by video conference because the convening at one location of a quorum of the governmental body is not appropriate during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Based on current guidance from federal, state, and county authorities concerning large gatherings and social distancing during the COVID-19 public health emergency, there is no established location for an audience to observe the meeting. However, the live meeting is accessible through a web link that was timely and appropriately provided to the public and media as part of the meeting posting and via the district's website. As we would at any in-person meeting, members of the public who have followed the standard instructions for registering to speak during the public comment portion will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board-adopted procedures to the extent practicable. A video recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public on the college's website. Citizen inquiries, the public comment portion of the meeting is the next item on the agenda, but being that we have no folks that have signed up to speak to us, we will move on to item number 3, which is the discussion of bachelor's degrees by Dr. Albrecht.
Thank you, Chair Sanchez. In your board book, Regents, you'll see a handout. It's an Excel spreadsheet that has a listing of all of the community colleges in the state of Texas that already have baccalaureate degrees. And I think it was back in legislative session and maybe 10 years ago in 2011, I think, 3 community colleges in the state were already granted the right to offer baccalaureate degrees, Brazosport College being one of them. And then more recently in past legislative sessions, community colleges were more broadly given the authority to be able to offer bachelor's degrees, and many colleges around us have done so, as you can see from the spreadsheet. And we had briefly talked, and I'm talking about this probably four or more years ago, about, when will Alvin Community College do a baccalaureate degree? And we frankly just had too much on our plate already, in my mind, to even think about trying to tackle developing bachelor's degrees. Not because it's difficult to develop the degree, but what comes with it brings a lot of challenges, including a level change for Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, and other requirements such as in the degree program that you're offering, 25% of the faculty teaching have to have a terminal degree, and so forth. But our team and I were talking about it the other day, and we said, this will probably be something that will turn up in the next strategic plan, because as data is gathered and we compare ourselves in a variety of ways to other colleges in the across the state, but primarily in our region, we'll see that we're one of the few that hasn't stepped out and had a baccalaureate degree yet. But if we leave this to my thought then went to, okay, well, the next strategic plan doesn't even begin until fall of like August of 2022. And so that's 18 months from now, and it's a long time to wait. So, in thinking about it, I thought, let me bring this to the board today to have a conversation to see, is this something that you would like our team to start researching now? Looking at labor market demands and looking at what it would take for us to do a bachelor's degree, so that we can start teeing it up and not waiting a full 18 months before we even begin consideration of going forward. So I thought a workshop would be a perfect opportunity to do that. It doesn't have to be a lengthy discussion, but I would really like to hear what your thoughts are around us moving forward in the development of one first degree program. I think we have to approach it one at a time. And then, if that was successful in the future, then adding on additional programs. So I'll stop talking and ask that you share your thoughts.
Anyone? Board members? I would say that I think it might be prudent to at least examine maybe the degree of success that those colleges who added the baccalaureate program most recently, for instance, Brazosport, what kind of success are they having? Possibly, if you could talk to the president and see what kinds of things have been issues, just kind of an exploratory. And then I guess the other thing that I would think is, and I thought of Darren immediately because he's always talking about, what's that term that you're always talking about, Darren? There's a term in your field that you talk about all the time. But what areas out there would be something that has such a demand that it would be smart to explore the possibility. Chain thing, whatever you're talking about all the time. Yes.
Well, I'll add that I think it's worthy of exploration. I think there's probably some degrees that maybe the value add is higher than maybe some of the others. I mean, I know we've got strong relationships like with U of H, Clear Lake, et cetera, and things like that. So I know and I always think about the business end and the competition side and the partnerships and, but, I think especially with things like, I don't know, I guess all the ones I see here that are highlighted are in the nursing program. I guess that's the natural fit for where we think that might be the best opportunity would be to offer like a BSN. Is that the logic there, Dr. Albert?
That's a possibility, but to your earlier point, we would want to do labor market demand studies, and as Chair Sanchez said, really look at what were successes and failures at some of the other colleges. But we all of the degrees that we would consider offering, and this is for all of the community colleges, they are more what you might call more in the technical arena. We would never develop a bachelor's degree in British literature.
Right.
Or Russian history or something. It's going to be a workforce-based degree program. Our minds, and my team and I, kind of went to nursing as a choice, just because we are seeing everyone around us offering them, and because increasingly the hospitals are wishing to hire the bachelor's prepared nurses. But of course, we have the associate degree nursing program, so our students could transfer right into, successfully into a bachelor's program. So it'd be helpful. The other train of thought that we had is to go, you could see a lot of business administration and the like, a completer degree, let me just call it that, a completer degree for AAS graduates in any number of programs, something perhaps in the area of management and supervision, or something that would let a 2-year degree grad be promoted at work, start their own business, or become a supervisor. So those are where we're going, but we, again, we'd have to see what labor market looks like, and that's the kind of the idea behind getting your blessings to move forward to even do some research in this arena.
I'm all for the idea of doing research and exploring and seeing what the opportunity is. I do think that to me, I'll just give you an example, and I'll say this and then shut up. But I've had friends who are like, well, my kid's getting an accounting degree, and the irony there is that Bell mentioned blockchain. Accounting is one of those fields where it's going to be largely disrupted through technologies like blockchain in the not too distant future. But the sweet spot would be a kid who had, and I don't mean that term disrespectfully, but a student who had a accounting degree and they also understood blockchain. They would be well positioned for how that market's going to shift in the next few years. So there may be, as your team is taking a look at some of those things, not just looking at what the current market data is, but how is this stuff trending, and is there a degree that could be offered that maybe nobody else is really offering that much yet, that would be a great fit at our collegiate level. So I'm all for it though.
Thank you.
I would definitely be for researching it.
Great. Regent Starkey, any comments?
No, ma'am, other than to say that I agree.
Okay. Regent Tackard?
Yeah, I agree. We need to do some research and then look and see what the costs are going to be, because it's like with some of the programs, they're a lot more costly than the others, nursing being one of them. But I think with the last 2 years in nursing is mostly management classes, so it shouldn't be as comprehensive as what they do the first 2 years with a lot of clinicals and things like that. So hopefully it wouldn't cost that much. And yes, I think that's one we ought to really look at, is nursing, and then some of the management ones as she suggested.
Awesome. Regent Stux, I don't know whether he ever made it on. If not, I think, Dr. Albrecht, that the message from us is that, yes, let's proceed with some research, and then as you move along in that area with your team, y'all can bring us up to date on what you are finding. And then as the new administration moves in, we can see what will come of it. Okay?
Thank you. That's awesome. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 4, which is the discussion of the consent agenda. Dr. A and Jonathan Brush will go ahead and get us started on this.
I'll just kick us off briefly, Chair Sanchez, and then turn it over to Council Brush. I think we had a few board members who were interested in looking at how we could make a consent agenda work for us. And we had when we were building the new board policies with TASB had actually written in language for us for consent agenda, but at that time, the board was not interested, or at least the subcommittee that was helping me do the policies wasn't interested, so we struck it from the policy. So I reached out to TASB and asked them to reinsert the language so you could see it, and it is in your board book. So I would turn it over to Jonathan and let him take it from here.
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, John.
With respect to a consent agenda, there's no tremendous magic to it. It's simply a policy tool that the board can use as a way to streamline certain topics of the meetings that are routinely occurring topics or topics that likely will not merit significant discussion. Those topics can be lumped together onto a consent agenda, and the board would then move to approve each of those items with a single vote. That the primary consideration there is efficiency of meeting. If there's things that routinely are decided without discussion or approved without discussion, if any board member wishes to take something off of a consent agenda, they can request that it be removed from the consent agenda, and then that particular item would be treated like a normal action item on the board's agenda. So just because something is placed on the consent agenda does not mean that it is irrevocably changed into something that does not get its own discussion or its own motion. As Dr. Albrecht said, TASB has a policy amendment that is available, and it's a fairly small amendment that can be voted into policy. That's all the board would really need to do, is to put it on the board's regular meeting agenda and vote to adopt the consent agenda policy, if that's what the board would like to do. As a general practice, the consent agenda would be formulated just like the regular agenda under the college's board policy BD. Board members can, in writing, request topics be placed upon the consent agenda to Chair Sanchez, and also if the chair agrees, the item is placed on the agenda. Similarly, with the request of 3 board members, and then Dr. Albrecht prepares a draft for the chair to review and then publish. Typically, the chair is the one who makes the determination as to what goes onto the consent agenda. That, with a new consent agenda, can take a little time to get the sense of what everybody expects to see on the consent agenda, and those items that typically do not fall under a consent agenda, but the board chair would prepare and issue the agenda notice with items denominated as consent agenda items.
Jonathan, on the thing that you mentioned regarding items being on the consent agenda and board members wanting to move it to something other than the consent agenda, would that happen at the board meeting, or could it be, we get our board book, what, a week before or so before the meeting? So could then board members ask at that time for it to be moved? I mean, we still wouldn't have to redo the whole agenda. You know what I mean? The process that goes into getting that agenda built and published and out to us is time, very time. It has to be done in a timely manner. So what is your answer to that long-winded question?
Well, it's a very good question, and what I've typically seen and what typically occurs is board members will make the request in the meeting. That also eliminates the need for you all to continue to make different iterations of the agenda and the notice during that planning period, because I know it is work for y'all to get it ready, and then oftentimes you post early or you're prepared to post early. So there's no harm in removing an item from consent agenda at the meeting, and that is what I typically see and what I would recommend.
Okay. Jake, I know that you and I worked on, when this first came up, I had Jake go through our previous board agenda and go through and develop what he thought would have been a consent agenda. And if I had been a good board president, I would have had that here for us today. But tell us, Jake, what you found when you did that for us.
Sure. If I remember correctly, I think probably 40% at least of the agenda items I felt could have gone to the consent agenda. And quite honestly, I guess I'd emailed Dr. A, and the way I've seen it before in municipal government is the city manager puts it together, and then kind of like you said, sir, anything that people want to remove can be pulled at the time during the meeting. But I guess my thought of it is that we spend a lot of time listening to presentations, and then when we get to the meat and potatoes of us needing to actually discuss something, we're mentally exhausted from listening to presentations, and the debate that we could be having, good, bad, or indifferent, is shrunk because we're listening to a lot of great presentations. I'm all for us getting scholarships. I'm all for the hiring practices and processes that we do. It just seems like we could, even at the last meeting, there was 3 people that were being voted on, I believe. And I believe it was Mrs. Hertenberger that compiled them into one so that we could vote. Well, to me, that's something that could have just been on the consent agenda. And if we have an issue, we need to pull them out, we can. But it allows us to do one fell swoop of stuff and then get to the meat and potatoes of what we should be talking about. I hope that answered your question, Belle.
Yes, it did. And I think, I think we all live and learn. And so I think, I've been living with doing the agenda like we're doing now, and Dr. Albrecht inherited this when she got here, and we've survived it. But if there's a more efficient way to do things, I think we are all for it. I think one thing we need to remember is if we all, we've done a good job, I think, of taking our agenda and studying it such that if we have questions, we give them to Dr. A and we can discuss it in open session, but we can get our questions kind of out of the way. And then if we feel like they need to be shared with the rest of the board, we do it in our board meeting. But if we can, anything we can do to make our meetings efficient and honor everyone's time, because we are all volunteers except the poor staff. They have to be with us. So I think it's a good move. I don't know, I guess we would need to put it on our next agenda, Jonathan, if we as a board feel like we want to move in this direction.
That's
Right.
correct. The board would need to adopt a policy amendment. Could use the TASB supplement or the TASB model policy and adopt that policy so that the board's policy BD would provide for use of a consent agenda. And then the board could begin using the consent agenda on a going forward basis.
Okay, I know, Jake, you had a question about part of the this sample board policy. I don't know if Jody or Andy or Darren had any comments or concerns about any of it. Any of you?
I didn't. I was just hoping we could vote on it today and get it behind us.
I don't think we can we? I mean,
yeah, I think we have to. Jonathan, do we have to wait till the regular board meeting?
Yes, you would need to. I didn't see anything that would appear to be an action item or a suggestion of
right.
anything
Oh, yeah.
other than discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Well, get it on there, Dr. Albrecht.
So I
Will do. So
Almost
Chair
to that-
Sanchez,
Yes.
Regent Jake had a question that he had proposed to us in email, and I forwarded it to legal counsel. So legal counsel, Jonathan, would you be able to respond to that question?
Sure, and I can, the question is essentially, why does the board chair make the determination as to what goes onto the consent agenda, framed in the context of municipal governments where sometimes it's the city manager who makes the determination as to what goes onto the agenda. I think the answer really is rooted in the education code's requirement that the board has certain statutory oversight over the college. There are different laws and rules that govern the role of a city manager, and many cities are creatures of charter. And so those delineate the authority that a city manager may have. So it could be a number of different reasons why cities proceed differently. But junior colleges and K through 12 school districts operating under the education code with that oversight function typically has the board making that determination with the assistance of the president compiling, but it's ultimately going to be a board call. And of course, just for purposes of efficiency, allowing the chair, consistent with policy BD, to shape the agenda based on request from board members is where the board chair would make the determinations to what goes on the consent agenda. And of course, the check is always that other board members can make suggestions as to the sorts of things that should ultimately be on the consent agenda and can pull items off of the consent agenda. I think if the board were to adopt a consent agenda in a relatively short time, there emerges an understanding, I think, as to what everybody expects to see on the consent agenda and the items that would not properly be on the consent agenda.
And I think to go with that, I mean, the fact that I asked you, Jake, to go through and create a consent agenda based on our regular agenda makes all of you know that I am always open to whatever suggestions you guys have. And I think, as Jonathan says, once we start working with the consent agenda, we will all get comfortable with it, and we will all together note those things that maybe shouldn't be put on consent agenda. So we shouldn't have to be pulling things off all the time if they in fact shouldn't go on the consent agenda. I think it's a live and learn situation. So if you guys are in agreement, I think we could ask Dr. A and her team to get us ready to put this on the next agenda. What do y'all think?
I got one point.
Okay.
If we're looking in the board handbook, the revision area, the red font, it says when the agenda is prepared, the board president. It's just a consistency thing. If you look right above it, you see board chairperson and college president. I think that should read when the agenda is prepared, the board chairperson, just for a sake of consistency in the verbiage. I think it should read that way as opposed to board president, because board president is almost a combination of the two previously mentioned titles.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Good catch.
I think you're right.
But I mean, from a flow perspective, to the point that we were discussing previously, I mean, when you look right above it, the preparation section, the college president compiles for review by the board chairperson all topics timely submitted. I would imagine in a functional way, as we just mentioned, that in due course, the consent agenda will not be a laborious thing that the chairperson has to spend much time working on. It'll almost be theoretical old hat. But I'd like to just mention one more thing to something that Jake said, and that is, I do think for our presentations, it would be helpful if maybe some general guidance was given to the presenters that they have a relative expectation on how long their presentation is going to last, as opposed, and I'm not assuming that that's not already communicated to some people, but it's useful if they know, hey, look, you got 3 minutes, and that they know that they need to be able to present within 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 8 minutes. I recognize that some presentations are obviously going to need longer than others, but and we would welcome to have them in Toastmasters if they want to practice speaking with a stoplight that lets them know it's about time to wrap it up. We'll be happy to. I ought to be able to get a shout from Miss Del Bello on that part.
Yes, you can.
I'm picking at her. But anyway, I do think it's a good idea if we work on that some, because there are some of these presentations where people wax eloquent, as I'm doing right now. I'm doing this strictly for case in point.
Well, I know that our board as a whole would really welcome efficiency, and you know, if I have been party to making these meetings long and drawn out, I am sorry, but I will improve. I think the message is loud and clear, Dr. A, that we want this on the agenda. Anyone else have any more comments? Okay. If not, I think that will be an item on our next agenda. And thank you, Jonathan. We will see you in executive. So let's move on to item number 5, the finance leaseback presentation. Mr. Hill, do you want to get us going on that? Or Dr. A, did you need to introduce anything?
Certainly. I'll just very briefly say that several months back, Greg Hill and his associate, Kevin Machoa, reached out to us to say they had a great idea for us if we were interested in ever wanting to build a building or have a secondary campus location. And so I listened to a presentation. It's similar but better than something that I am familiar with that we did 20 years ago, and we started up a center at Lone Star College where we a developer built the building for us, and then we leased it back until it was paid off. But the way that they do it is it's even better because it saves more money. Anyway, after listening to it, I said, I think it's great. I could never explain this to my board. So how would you like to come and give a presentation to briefly explain about this process? And so they agreed, and therefore they are here at our workshop today.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Albrecht. I'm not going to be the one making the presentation because Kevin is far smarter and superior to me when it comes to explaining this stuff. But I'm pretty excited because it's certainly a tool in the toolbox that Alvin Community College and many taxing entities can use. And so I'll kick it off to Kevin, and I'm certainly his associate in this regard. So Kevin,
thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. Today I'll be brief and honor your busy schedules here, but we did want to take a few minutes to walk through a scenario that may make sense for Alvin Community College. I'm Kevin Matoka. I'm president of Stonehenge Holdings. We are a real estate development company based in Houston that focuses on the development of projects for different municipalities and school districts, community colleges, what have you. Part of that deals with our history of over 25 years of development work for what we called private-public partnerships back before the state really truly had a name for them. We referred to them as capital lease projects. Some of the projects that we have concluded and developed in our area involve Houston Community College. We built the Northwest Town Center campus for Houston Community College. Worked very close with Betty McCrowan at Wharton County Junior College. We're doing a project right now for Fort Bend County. We just completed the Texas A&M Hotel and Conference Center on the Texas A&M campus. And another facility that we did was the Emergency Management Center for Harris County. And these projects all have one thing in common, as stepping back, as we all understand procurement side of what you deal with when you develop projects, your standard procurement process. It is a good process, and it is the main tool that typically you refer to and you go to when you want to develop a campus. The downside of the standard process of development makes it very, very lengthy and really not cost effective from the standpoint of the length of time it takes you to go through the entire process to develop really what you may need. So for example, when Harris County approached us and said, we just came off of a large storm, or we found that our emergency management facilities were not up to par, we needed to do something rapidly. How could we do that? We put it under this structure whereby we could deliver a project working directly with the county, exactly what they wanted in their project, but be able to deliver it substantially faster. The process is one whereby we work with the client to develop the development to their needs. We own the facility. We pass our internal bonds, and we develop the facility, turn it over to the user, and you enter into a form of a 25, 30, 35-year lease, whereby at the end of that term, you own the facility. So, for example, in the area of the Emergency Management Center for Harris County, worked very, very well. In the area of Texas A&M and the Hotel Conference Center, we were able to develop that in a very timely manner. And so some colleges, community colleges, are looking for ways to develop and enhance their campuses. And this is certainly a tool in that toolbox. It used to be that when we would enter into a long-term lease with a community college, our bonds that we would sell internally off that lease there was a little bit of a separation as far as bond buyers and cost wise, meaning that you're either entering to a lease with our firm versus directly with the community college. And because of that, there was a premium that were paid on those bonds. Nowadays, through the tax code that has taken place with the IRS, we're able to actually do this through many conduits that enable us to have tax exempt financing. So we can borrow dollars on an equivalent basis to what the community college would. So you're able to streamline a process rapidly, and it becomes extremely efficient, and the delivery can be rapid. So let me, if I can here, let me see if I can bring up well, there we go. Here is a short presentation to just give you an idea of what we're talking about. So, again, we're a firm that specializes in the development of public entities with an emphasis on private-public partnerships. Typically, what we do is we are approached by a group that would need development of facilities, works with us through a pre-development phase to determine need, preliminary costs, these types of things, and then work to give you a 20,000-foot overview in a sense of how it would be structured, term, working with your internal financial groups as well as your FAs to come up with the structure. Overall, here are some of our facilities that we've done. We have the beauty of bringing experts to the table. So whereby, for example, at Texas A&M, where they're not accustomed to development of, they can build buildings. They have groups that can do that, but they didn't have a lot of expertise in not only the design, but the management of hotels. We actually bring and assemble that team and bring them to the table. So here are a few of the groups that we work with, or we're working with currently from our finance side, from our design, from our general contracting side, that we assemble to bring to the table. Here's a structure of how it works. So we have, through our conduit, we enter into a loan agreement with the college, and it rolls down into a master lease for the college. Those payments do not begin until the facility is developed and COs are received. And then it rolls down, so you have quiet possession of the facility. Although this is a lease whereby it is annual appropriation leases. Our bond buyers are comfortable with that. From a financial standpoint, as you look at your financial statement, it does show just like a typical ground lease scenario. It does not show as a general obligation debt. So it doesn't encumber you as much necessarily. It will certainly be shown, needs to be shown, but that's how the asset would be accounted for from a financial standpoint. So the process is one whereby once a need is found, some very preliminary work is done to try to get you in a ballpark of what you would be looking at from a lease standpoint. Then internally, obviously from your standpoint, each development's different, but from this standpoint, if you were wanting academic facilities, you've got internal cost as well to determine as far as employees, staffing, maintenance, what have you. But once that is determined that it is a scenario that makes sense to move forward, although not required by state law, it is highly recommended that you would go out into the market and perform some form of an RFQ to pick the correct company that works best for you. Once that selection is made, you go through with that process in an interim services agreement, which allows that firm to go out and start doing the location of land, the development, what have you, and get you down to a further process before you enter into any long-term lease for the development. Again, here's some of quick stats on some of our experience where this model is used really all over the state, but there are derivatives of this mechanism. One is a special purpose entity that can be put together that is owned by the community college. However, the downside of that is that you do have to pay for any cost overruns that would occur with this facility. In our scenario, we deliver a lump sum price, and the burden is on us to deliver that project to you for that price. The process we go through is truly a hands-on working with your staff to ensure that the facility developed is one that you're comfortable with and that you wanted. All of the numbers from the GCs to the architects, all of those are totally open book for you to review and to look at along the process. Here is our community college system facility we built for HCC on the northwest side of town. So typically, we work with your FA and with your internal financial groups to determine what's the best structure for you. All along the way, you can have certain buyouts of the lease if you would like to. If you'd like to go ahead and take it in-house and go ahead and buy it out, so we can price those into the bonds as we look at moving forward. Any public use or private use, sorry, of any of the facilities that can be broken out, so we can have tax exempt and taxable bonds if need be. So it is a process whereby everything is open book, and it enables you to move quickly on developments, transparent on your developments, and it's one that we typically would see quite a few community colleges going to now. Unfortunately, with the current situation of the state, not only with COVID, but lack of funds, we see more and more where community colleges are not receiving the funds, quite frankly, they deserve. And they have to come up with some creative ways in order to do some development and for their growth and to stay competitive. So in the nutshell, that's very broad scenario of the process, but it is one whereby we're seeing more and more activity through different community colleges and universities as a whole, as well as some city municipalities as a way to develop campuses, develop facilities, remodel facilities, and stay competitive. So that's about as short as I can get with it, hoping for any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Folks, fellow Regents, do you have questions for our guest?
I got just one. I'm curious when I'm looking at this project y'all did for HCC. Was that an existing facility?
No, that was actually it was a facility. It was a combination of multiple different retail groups where we acquired the property, developed some additional buildings with it, excuse me, and then converted its use over to that campus.
Yeah, and that's what I was curious about. So, I guess y'all, it just depends on the variables of where the land can be acquired, where the need is, et cetera. I'm assuming y'all had to buy that property from that previous owners, maybe, and then.
Yes, we assembled that entire tract. Obviously, its location, because of the district and where it wanted to be, was critical. So we assembled those tracks and then came in and designed with the input of HCC to give them what they were looking for in that project.
Yeah, so I mean, that's obviously one like that from a development perspective, I suppose, is a whole lot more complex than just going out and buying a piece of dirt that there's nothing there and throwing something on it. What happens, how does it work if an institution already had land? I mean, without digging too deep, I'm guessing that A&M probably already had their land, or other colleges may have already owned land. And how does that work if they already have the dirt? And then
We simply, correct, that's a good scenario. On the A&M project, we simply, because it was campus property owned by the state of Texas, you can't obviously sell that. So we entered into, the nonprofit entered into a long-term lease for that land from the university. With the development project approved by the system, and therefore we were able to build it on that track. And ultimately, those improvements then, at the expiration of that lease, those improvements then revert back to the university for $1.
Got it. Thank you.
Interesting.
So we wouldn't be required to buy the land. It would be a part of the whole building package, correct?
Correct, exactly. So it's really no dollars up front from the community college, and in fact, it can be structured so many different ways. We typically put the interim interest cost into the development. If there's any land as well, that can be put into the property. A certain amount of FF&E as well. So we try to structure it whereby there's minimal or $0 from the college until the project is completed. Now it has to meet your approval upon the acceptance of the CO. So you're signing off on a set of plans that you've helped design and at that cost. And we develop that. If that's to your liking, you sign off. And then it's not uncommon. We have some structures whereby they need to ramp up. No different than this scenario. You may have a new facility that's going to take you a couple of years to really get the students into the facility and build that enrollment. You can go interest only for the first couple of years of the lease, followed by principal and interest from there on out. Lots of different ways to structure the scenario to limit your dollars until those dollars actually start coming in.
Okay, this sounds almost too good to be true to get a piece of property out on the west side. I would be very excited for that. How do we determine what cost we could afford, basically, for lack of a better word?
Okay. And what we typically do is is come in at no cost to the district, but we come in and we can do a very preliminary analysis for you to try to get an understanding. You're looking at 30,000 feet, 50,000 feet, what kind of facilities you're looking for, lab space, all that type of stuff. We've done enough of these where we can come up with some very preliminary drawings to kind of say, are we heading in the right direction? Is this what you want? Usually, a lot of people and a lot of groups that we work with in this scenario typically like to buy a larger tract of land to look for down the road improvements that you can add on, down the road to your campus. You don't want to be landlocked day one. So under this scenario, putting it all into the development, you would end up with, if you needed 6 acres, for example, for your first building, but ultimately you needed a 30 or 40 acre campus, you have the ability to buy that larger tract, hold on to it, roll it all through the development. But the original scenario enables us to go do kind of a down and dirty scenario for you to say, here's kind of what you're looking at. Here's your land cost. Here's your development cost. You want FF&E in there. Here's that cost. We share all those open numbers with you and say, therefore, at today's interest rate, your annual lease payments would be X. And that gives you a yes, that's within our ballpark. We need to scale down. We can spend more. It leaves before you start really spending dollars with architects, surveys, soil reports, all these types of things. Before you start doing all that, you can get a pretty good idea of what your lease payment obligation would be before you make any form of a commitment. If at that scenario, at that stage, you feel comfortable that you want to move forward, once you choose your developer to move forward, you go through some form of a RFQ process. Then you would allocate a certain amount of dollars, enabling the developer to go out, put some land under contract, start doing a survey, soils, the initial report, getting much more detailed. At the end of that stage, come back to the board to say, are we still heading in the right direction? Here's your cost. Are we still within that comfort factor? If it is, you continue to move forward. You're not obligated at any stage of this until we say, okay, all the plans are done. Here they are. Here's your lease payment. Would you like to move forward? In the event you don't move forward, you own all of that material. But if you do move forward, then at that point you execute those documents, and within 5 weeks or so, we go to the market, pass our internal bonds, and we start construction.
How do we decide where the location would be, or how do you know where the location would be? How do we determine that?
The location is worked, and I can't stress this enough. I mean, this is really working with your staff. The way to be efficient with this is to designate however many members, typically it's 3 to 5 members of staff that we would work directly with and under their guidance to determine where it should go. And we would bring staff back or the board, at that matter, if you wanted to structure it that way. Here are our 4 or 5 sites we found. Do these meet the criteria? Which one would you like to go with? And so we kind of move in that direction, working directly with staff, because they would get your guidance on, again, what departments, what are going to go there. Is this administrative? Is this classroom space? Or is this lab space? We need to understand all of that as we go out and venture out through that process.
If I might interject potentially too, since it's a lease, you would not have to go out for RFQs. I mean, that obviously it's the right thing to do, but you could jump right into it, and it's not going to show up on the budget, as Kevin said, on the front page as a debt, but it's, it's an annual appropriation. Since it's a lease, you could also, and y'all had mentioned a baccalaureate program with, be it nurses or what have you, if you had a facility on the west side, like I know that there's been some discussion of, with the medical center coming down 288, potentially you could have your own tenant as well that offsets whatever lease payment you're making. So for example, if you have Memorial Hermann or someone in there that wanted to have some kind of facility that was paying you lease, it could even be your typical vendors as it relates to restaurants, since there's a college there. Now you're talking about having a facility that's being paid for by vendors. So,
and the only thing I would add to that is, and that is not uncommon at all. People are always looking for ways to offset the expenditure of the lease. It's not, and you know that it's not just the lease, it's your employees you put in there, operational cost and what have you. So we would do an analysis of that to try to give you a good ballpark of what that is. Now, if you did a bond scenario or something of that effect, it's strictly a public use facility. If you want to bring in private use, you certainly can do that. That portion of that, there's a certain portion that you can bring in that would not affect your tax exempt bond rating. If you brought in over that amount, which is not uncommon, those are taxable rates just for that purpose. But if those revenues bringing in, for example, we're working on a multi-purpose facility for a county right now that is bringing in sports tourism. With that sports tourism, they're really promoting wellness, health wellness, and they'd like to work with a large physician group here in the city of Houston. And they want to come and be part of this facility. This is where the community comes. Therefore, they would like to be part of it. They'd like to lease about 15,000 feet within the facility. So that rent will go to also offset not only that part of the development, but some of your lease payments. So there are ways to do a lot of that as well.
Very good. I just have one more question. How long would the just roughly how long would the process take from the time if we voted at the next meeting to say yes, let's go forward with this? How long would that process take before we could actually get it up and moving?
Well, depending on the depth and the scope of work is one thing, but typically within 60 to 90 days working with your staff, understanding the direction you want to go, what you want there. Once we get that determination, we go out into the market, find what's there, bring it back, build that consensus with that team. We're able to come back at a very high level to say, here's kind of what we've been told. You wanted X amount of square feet of academic space. You want a certain amount of square feet of different management space. You want a piece of property that you can grow on. You wanted this, this, and this, and all those have been met. We feel like we can price it quickly. We can come back to give you a good range of where we think that would be, usually in about 90 days. I can tell you that on the hotel project, which is fairly complicated, from revenues and development, parking garage, operator, all of that, we did that in 120 days. So it's not a lengthy process. And the worst scenario is you look at it and say, wow, that's exactly what we want to do, or we can expand, or that's too expensive. Thanks, but no thanks, and you go from there. So there's no commitment from that standpoint, but at least gives you a good idea in your mind of what it would cost, how the process works, working with your financial groups as well as your FAs and legal and all that stuff to understand how all these impacts affect everything. And then from there, if you want to move forward, a certain amount of dollars are allocated for us to move to the next level. So we really dive into the architecture, we dive into that specific property specific, look at all kinds of things from drainage to a host of items. Now we're really honing in a much closer number. That's looked at again, and if you want to proceed, additional dollars are allocated. And when I say that, it's probably in maybe the $200,000 range, something to that effect, to really get you down the road to where you have some concrete stuff that we can start working with our host of general contractors to get you the best price and the most efficient price we can. And then we come back to you with a price not to exceed number, and you'll be able to look through all of that and make that determination. Do we want to now move forward to the next step?
Okay, thank
And
you.
as Greg mentioned, and we can't stress this enough, timing is usually critical, but doing it right, ensuring you're getting exactly what you need is typically overpowers that. So we want to be sure the process is detailed enough. You can go out for a bid to find you. We firmly believe, we've done more of these than anybody in the state of Texas. We believe we would do the best job for you. If you can find somebody else through the process, we encourage you to do it. So I think it's good prudence to take 60 days if you want to go down that process after you've analyzed the first scenario, and to say, yeah, this is a process we would like to do. We recommend that you go out for an RFQ process. Let everybody and anybody submit. You choose the best group for you, and then you move forward.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Jody? Okay. Jake or Andy, Darren, do y'all have any more questions? I would like, fellas, if we could, to make sure that Dr. A has a copy of this presentation, because we have 3 board members that are not here today. And I would like to make sure that they get a copy of this presentation such that they can study it. And if they have any questions, we might need to somehow get them to get some answers, because I know there will probably be questions when they get to see this. Any comments from any of you?
Well, I think this I think his PowerPoint was the same as what we had in the board book.
Okay, good. So there's nothing different. Okay, good. Then that will be there. Hopefully they will review it. And hopefully those of you who asked your questions, if we have an opportunity, we can share some of the questions that we asked and the answers, because truly it's thought-provoking. It's something that has been on our mind for some time. So I think we need to make sure that everybody's up to speed on the information that we had presented. It means a lot more to hear it directly, but when you can't, we'll do the best we can. Anybody else have a comment or a question, Andy or Jake?
No, I agree. It sounds like a good idea, and I'm excited for the presentation, or excited that we had the presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, anything? Okay. If we have no further questions on this item, and we would like to thank our guest today for the information. Dr. Albrecht, I don't know if you want to have any closing comments about this?
The only closing comment I had is this is food for thought for y'all. We are in some uncertain times right now, but I think that one thing is certain is that this college is eventually going to need to have a presence on the west side of our taxing district. And so having this information and options to move forward in a different direction than what we have done in the past, I think it has some merit. So thank you very much to our guest speakers.
Thank you, Dr. A. Thank you, Greg and Kevin. We are now going to we are now going to adjourn to a closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071 for the purpose of private consultation with our attorneys to deliberate the timeline of the presidential selection process, as in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 551.074, to deliberate the dismissal of a public officer or employee in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 551.074. The time is now 1:06, and so we will we'll exit this session and go into executive session, right? So I'm ready to call this meeting back to order. We are going to back out of executive session, and we're going back into the general session. It is 1:25. And the item on the agenda is item number 7, the presidential search update. And all I have to report is that we have been working with Greenwood and Ashley Quinones, your search team chair, and I have been working with them. We have now received an email. All the presidential search committee members have received an email from the firm, and we are going to be in full operation mode reviewing applicants for this week and next until we meet on February the 4th. And at the February 4th meeting, we will be discussing the applicants that we have been handed. And so we are moving right along. We are excited. We are going to be working very hard. So for all of you who pray, be praying for your presidential search team, because they are going to be doing lots of homework. And with that, that is it. That's all that we have to say about our presidential search update. We are excited that we're moving along. Thank you to Ms. Giffro for all the work that she's helping us with as we move forward. And with that, if there is nothing further, I am going to say that we are adjourned at 1:27 on Monday, January the 25th. Thank you all. Goodbye. Have a great afternoon.